For the longest time, the mainline Pokémon formula has been relentlessly unmoving, but by all accounts, Scarlet and Violet were meant to deliver the innovation this series needed to avoid an endless cycle of stagnation. Releasing on the 18th of November as a Nintendo Switch exclusive, these games feel like the completion of a vision workshopped in Legends Arceus and Sword and Shield. Where those games had section-off maps that acted as a litmus test for open-world mechanics, Scarlet and Violet steer fully into the open-world model, aside from a few choice locations. Every Pokémon is physicalized in the world, and almost every aspect of the game that can be seen can be traveled to. This starts off quite differently to the regular Pokémon games too. Your chosen avatar is a transfer student at a school, and you really can take classes here if you wish. These will give you some basic insight into the Pokémon games and introduce you to characters who trigger the 3 paths this game counts as its main story. This is no longer a linear adventure where the game gates off a lot of content to keep a hand on its pacing. The element of choice has been added, and you know what? It really helps. This further extends to trainer battles too, where you are no longer being ambushed each time an ornery bug catcher glances in your direction. You, the player, must initiate every single trainer battle. I can't overstate how much these seemingly insignificant changes affect the Pokémon formula to such a degree that these genuinely feel like new games, rather than minor touch-ups and roster additions. From the outset, this game gives you your box legendary, but not to battle with, rather as a mount that can help you explore this world. The 3 main paths you have to choose from are now more than just collect 8 badges. That element of the game is there also, but you have 2 other paths to follow should you choose. The Path of Legends is where this game takes inspiration from Legends Arceus. Arven, the student at the academy who introduces you to this path, wants to use rare and mystical herbs to make a really amazing sandwich, among some other reasons. Helping him sees you fight gigantic Titan Pokémon that are guarding these ingredients. His path is by far the best of the 3 available. There's a genuine level of competency in the story here, and something that feels at stake. These Titan encounters are not particularly difficult, but they unlock new abilities for your mount. These are by far the most useful rewards in terms of those that affect gameplay, and Arven also plays a key role in the game's final act. If his Path of Legends is a strength, the other path, Starfall Street, is this game's weakness. This sees you take on Team Star, the game's antagonist faction of sorts. I suppose these are designed to be the Team Rocket style bad guys, but the threat posed by this faction is non-existent, as Team Star are, at their absolute worst, kids getting detention. Any true semblance of evil or criminality are gone from the game. The worst Team Star ever manage is prolific truancy. Their bases do host another gameplay mechanic, a sort of overworld open battle, where your team fights theirs in horde-style encounters. These are an extension of the Let's Go feature, where you throw out the first Pokemon in your party and they auto-battle in the overworld. This wasn't badly implemented, I just didn't feel like it added anything to my experience. The final path is the more traditional Victory Road, and this is the route of battling gym leaders, with some of Sun and Moon's influence left in. You have to complete a test before you can take on each gym. These range from a mini-game where you have to push an olive into a basket, to a basic press the button I press game, which was insultingly easy. All of these just feel like unnecessary gateways to the bit you actually came for, the gym leader. Rather than building suspense, they all felt like a long car journey. Except, here, I was the kid yelling, "Are we there yet?" Victory Road does feature the best character though, namely your rival Nemona. Compared to the standard formula where this role is filled by someone who wants to beat you and is very rude from the start, Nemona's whole character is based around her love of battling. When you meet her, she's already a champion within Paldea. She acts as part of your rival and part as a guide. Unlike a lot of previous Pokemon rivals, she never got on my nerves, never forced me into a battle with her at an inconvenient time, and is a good ally for the game's finale. You can tackle these 3 paths in any order, but you must complete them all eventually to go to the mystical Area 0 and learn the truth about what goes on there. This is more late game than post game, and your completion of this arc will give you a chance to catch Paradox Pokemon from either the past or future, depending on whether you own Scarlet or Violet. That's all I'm going to say on that matter. In terms of gameplay, these games' major difference come in the form of this new world. All battles take place in the overworld, and you can see every Pokemon out in the wild roaming around. These Pokemon are still quite brain dead and limited in their interactions. They each have a few available roam paths and can spawn in packs. However, this isn't particularly exciting or interactive. This has been improved since Arceus, but these still feel like early noughties MMO mobs. The new mobility and freedom do help though. While gliding feels somewhat underwhelming, as you can only travel so far before you just fall out of the sky, the ability to climb up any rock face when you unlock that skill does mean you can go almost everywhere you can see. This world ultimately feels less sterile than the other Pokemon games, and less like you're repeating a formula, even if that is still exactly what you're doing. Battle, catch, level, repeat. As always, there's new monsters for a new generation, and a new gimmick, which does add an element of strategy to encounters. Called terrestrialization, this is very similar to Dynamaxing, except rather than making your creature a towering giant, it makes them a specific type, and boosts moves of that type. This allows for a bit of tactical nuance, as you can take a Pokemon that is normally weak to fire, give it a water Terra type, terrestrialize it, and remove that weakness. Most Pokemon have a Terra type that matches one of their actual types, and can boost naturally learned moves, but some strange and mysterious combinations can be found in Terra raid dens. On that note, this was the game that convinced me to get Nintendo Online. If you understand how the IV and EV systems work properly, you can do 6-star Terra raids solo. I want to say that this game does change a lot, but not every change is for the better. But these changes needed to be made. The Pokemon formula has been stagnating for so long that this injection of fresh life was sorely needed. I'd rather a company try something different for a good reason and fail than continuously roll out the same thing over and over and not try. Gaming and tech are two industries that should always be striving for innovation, and that requires these swings that sometimes miss. The new sandwich mechanic and the way that breeding works in this game are likely to be two of these topics that get a handful of members of this community clattering away at their keyboards in disgust. While the game's openness about shiny rates, early game help with EV training, and accessible hyper training are going to make endgame activities available for gamers who don't want to spend hours farming a perfect IV Ditto. Adding an open world to a game that already had solid foundations was comparable to what Elden Ring did for the Dark Souls formula. The existing mechanics here were so good that an open world actually added something, rather than just creating a checklist of map markers to go to. Very few games can claim that result from such a choice. While I am confident that Scarlet and Violet are the best Pokemon games currently available, they are also the ones that perform the worst. In certain areas, the frame rate in this game is awful, struggling to get anywhere close to 30, even at the best of times, and this was often just a mess of frames. This is made significantly worse by the awful draw distance and pop-in of assets, which is a massive issue when sprinting on your ride Pokemon. This is compounded by the fact that graphically this game is already very poor. The anime art style of Pokemon only helps so much, when a lot of these world elements feel like they use PS2 era polygons. Even if you only compare this to other Switch games, this leaves a hell of a lot to be desired. I didn't experience many of the truly horrific visual bugs that have been shared around on social media, but I would much prefer those clearly fixable issues to this poor performance. There are certain areas of the game you just can't go to because this is so bad. Loading times for some of the online activities and unskippable cutscenes for terrestrialization also add to my list of gripes. For a game that should have been lifted up as one of the best Switch exclusives, this list just gets longer and longer. One of the biggest non-performance issues I have is with customization. You are essentially locked to your school uniform for torso and leg slots, with only the bare minimum of accessories for hands, feet and head. This world features characters and models young and old, large and small, and some of the gym leaders and team star leaders have unique hairstyles and outfits. These should have been unlockable, or purchasable in-game, as these assets clearly already exist. Instead, you end up with the same looking trainers in raid battles, because there's little choice otherwise. I'm not asking for this game to be a cosplay simulator, but at least let me buy jeans and a t-shirt in a game. Game Freak's best Pokemon game to date built well upon Legends Arceus and Sword and Shield to make a game I was genuinely excited to play. I would happily recommend it to all if it didn't feel like the performance in its current state hampers every effort made to introduce new gameplay elements. Smarter people than me can perform tests and collect evidence to see if this was a result of poor optimization or a lack in the power of the hardware. But this end result is what we have, and that's what matters. It goes a long way to cancelling out all the good that Scarlet and Violet brought to the table, and ultimately, the game feels lackluster and unfinished as a result.